It was a chilly evening, and the golden hues of the setting sun were slowly fading into a somber gray sky. The bridge stretched ahead like an endless path, its faint glow from the dim streetlights barely illuminating the way. Dana, a young pregnant woman in her late 20s, stood by the railing, her coat pulled tightly around her swelling belly. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the sheer weight of the situation she found herself in. Her car, a battered sedan she had relied on for years, had sputtered its last breath halfway across the bridge. Stranded with no cell service and no one in sight, Dana felt the pressing anxiety of her isolation. Every passing second seemed to stretch longer, her mind racing with 1,000 worries. She was 8 months pregnant, and the thought of anything happening to her or her baby out here in the middle of nowhere sent chills down her spine. Why tonight? She whispered to herself, her breath visible in the crisp air. Of all nights? She leaned against the car, trying to calm her nerves. The occasional whoosh of a distant vehicle below offered little comfort. Her only lifeline now was to wait and hope someone, anyone, would stop to help. But as minutes turned into what felt like hours, the emptiness of the bridge became suffocating. The city on the horizon seemed like a world away, and the weight of helplessness settled heavily on her chest. Just as she was about to give in to despair, the faint growl of engines echoed in the distance. At first, it was barely noticeable, blending with the ambient noise of the wind and occasional rustling of leaves. But soon the sound grew louder, distinct, and undeniable. Motorcycles, several of them. Dana's heart began to race, but this time not from fear of being alone. Her instincts battled each other. Relief at the prospect of help clashed with the uncertainty of who was approaching. The stereotypes and stories she had heard growing up flashed through her mind. Bikers could be dangerous, also she'd been told, but what choice did she have? The roar of the engines grew closer, and soon the silhouettes of the riders appeared. There were at least 6 of them, clad in leather jackets and helmets, their bikes gleaming under the faint lights. The lead rider, a tall figure with broad shoulders, raised a hand, signaling the others to slow down. They pulled up alongside her car, their presence commanding and intimidating. "Hey there," the lead rider said, his voice deep but not unkind. He pulled off his helmet to reveal a rugged face softened by a pair of kind eyes. "What's going on? You all right?" Dana hesitated, her hands instinctively moving to her belly. "My car broke down," she said, her voice shaky. "And I don't have any cell service." The man's gaze flicked to her belly, and his expression shifted, a mix of concern and determination. "All right," he said after a pause. "We've got this. You're not staying out here alone." The other bikers dismounted, their presence less intimidating as they exchanged nods with Dana and began assessing the situation. One of them, a woman with a fierce but warm demeanor, approached and placed a reassuring hand on Dana's shoulder. "Don't worry, honey," she said. "We'll take care of you." Dana's heart softened slightly, though the tension hadn't entirely left her. She watched as the group worked together, their movements swift and purposeful. Some inspected the car while others made calls on their phones. The lead rider returned with a bottle of water and a blanket, handing them to Dana. "You're not just out here by yourself, are you?" he asked, his tone gentle. "I was heading home," Dana admitted. "My husband's waiting for me. I didn't expect this to happen." As the bikers exchanged glances, a sense of understanding passed between them, though Dana couldn't quite decipher it. The woman biker, who introduced herself as Maggie, stayed by Dana's side, chatting with her to keep her calm. "You're lucky we came by," Maddie said with a small smile. "This bridge can be a ghost town at this hour." The lead rider, who introduced himself as Jax, approached again, this time with a firmer expression. "We'll get you off this bridge," he said, "but we've got to move fast. This place isn't the safest after dark." Before Dana could ask what he meant, the faint sound of distant laughter echoed across the bridge. It wasn't the friendly kind. It was sharp, echoing, and eerie. Dana's chest tightened as she saw the bikers exchange tense glances. "Time to go," Jack said, his voice firm. "Now." Dana's pulse quickened at the sound of the distant laughter. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a shiver racing down her spine. She turned toward Jax, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on? Who's out there?" Jax didn't answer immediately. He gave a quick nod to one of the other bikers, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a serious expression, who immediately started scanning the dark edges of the bridge. The rest of the group sprang into action, their previously calm demeanor replaced with a quiet urgency. "Just some folks who like to cause trouble," Maddie said, keeping her voice even. Her warm tone was still there, but Dana could sense the edge in her words. "Don't worry, we're not going to let anything happen to you." Dana's grip on the blanket tightened as her thoughts raced. Trouble. Out here. Why did it feel like she had stumbled into something bigger than just a broken-down car? The bikers, who moments ago had seemed intimidating, were now her only source of safety, and that realization made her stomach churn with unease. Jax knelt beside her, his face serious but calm. "We don't have time to explain everything, but you need to trust us. Can you do that?" Dana hesitated. Trust wasn't something she gave easily, especially to strangers, but the way Jax looked at her, steady and direct, made her feel like she didn't have much of a choice. She nodded slowly. "Good," he said, standing up. "We're getting you and your baby out of here." One of the bikers, a younger man with a soft voice who introduced himself as Eli, approached Dana's car with a flashlight. "The engine's shot," he said after a quick look. "It's not going anywhere." Jax glanced at Eli, then back at Dana. "That means we're taking you with us. Maggie will ride with you on the back of her bike. You'll be safe." Dana's eyes widened. She had never been on a motorcycle before, let alone while 8 months pregnant. The idea of climbing onto the back of one, on a dark bridge no less, filled her with dread. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Maddie said firmly, cutting her off but not unkindly. "I got you. We'll go slow, and you'll be fine." The laughter grew louder, closer this time, and Dana flinched. Whoever, or whatever, was out there was coming. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, even if it meant doing something as terrifying as riding on a bike. She nodded again, this time more urgently. The bikers moved quickly, their actions practiced and efficient. Maggie helped Dana to her feet, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders and guiding her gently toward a sleek black motorcycle. Dana's knees wobbled as she climbed onto the seat, her heart pounding in her chest. Maggie climbed on in front of her, reaching back to place a steadying hand on Dana's arm. "Hold on tight," Maggie said over her shoulder, "and don't let go." The other bikers mounted their bikes, their engines roaring to life in unison. The sound was almost deafening, but it was also strangely comforting. Dana clung to Maggie as they began to move, the cool night air whipping against her face. The bridge stretched out before them, its end shrouded in darkness. As they rode, Dana couldn't help but glance over her shoulder. The laughter had stopped, but the eerie silence that followed was even worse. Her imagination ran wild with possibilities. Who were these people? Why were the bikers so cautious? And why did it feel like this bridge was more than just a random place where her car had broken down? The group rode in a tight formation, their headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons. Jax led the way, his posture tense but focused. Dana could see him glancing back occasionally, his eyes scanning the shadows. She wanted to ask what was happening, but the words caught in her throat. There was something about the way they moved, the way they seemed to know this wasn't just a normal ride, that made her stay silent. After what felt like an eternity, Jax raised a hand, signaling the group to slow down. They came to a stop near the end of the bridge, where the road widened into a small clearing. The bikers dismounted, their movements quick and purposeful. Jax approached Dana and Maggie, his expression grim. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, "but this is as far as we can get on the bridge. We'll need to figure out the next step from here." Dana opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, a noise in the distance caught everyone's attention. It wasn't laughter this time. It was the unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps, slow, deliberate, and growing closer. The bikers tensed, their eyes darting toward the darkness. Jax motioned for everyone to stay quiet, his hand resting on something at his side. Dana couldn't tell what it was. A weapon, maybe. Her breath hitched, and she instinctively tightened her grip on Maddie's arm. "What's happening?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. Jax didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, his body a shield between Dana and whatever was coming. The other bikers spread out, forming a protective circle around her. For a moment, the only sounds were the rustling of the wind and the distant hum of the city beyond the bridge. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. Tall and lanky, with a swagger in his step, the man looked like he belonged in a bad dream. His clothes were tattered, his face partially obscured by a hood. Behind him, more figures appeared, each one more menacing than the last. They stopped a few yards away, their presence heavy and oppressive. Well, the first man drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like we've got ourselves a little party." Jax didn't move, his stance firm and unyielding. "We're just passing through," he said evenly. "No need for trouble." The man laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made Dana's stomach churn. Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We were just curious, that's all. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Dana's mind raced as she clung to Maggie, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know who these people were or what they wanted, but one thing was clear. This wasn't a random encounter. The man took a step closer, his eyes gleaming in the faint light. "You see," he said, his tone turning cold, "nobody crosses this bridge without paying the toll." The man's words hung in the cold night air, sharp and heavy. Dana's breath hitched as she pressed closer to Maggie, trying to make herself smaller. The bikers didn't flinch, their formation holding firm. Jax stepped forward, his presence commanding, though his voice remained calm. "We're not here to cause trouble," Jax said, his tone steady but with an edge that made it clear he wasn't about to back down. "We're just trying to get her someplace safe." The man tilted his head, the faintest hint of a smirk playing on his lips. "Safe, huh? Well, safe costs extra around here." He gestured lazily to the group behind him, and a low murmur of chuckles rippled through them. "So, let's talk about that toll." Dana's heart pounded, her eyes darting to the figures in the shadows. There were more of them than she'd realized, at least a dozen, maybe more. They spread out slightly, their movements calculated, like predators circling prey. Her hands instinctively went to her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the growing danger. Maggie leaned in, her voice low and firm. "Stay close to me no matter what. Don't run. Don't panic." Dana nodded, though her legs felt like jelly beneath her. She could hear the faint rustling of the bikers' jackets as they adjusted their stances. Eli, who had been quiet up until now, shifted his position slightly, placing himself between Dana and the approaching group. "We don't have anything to give you," Jack said, his voice cutting through the tension. "And even if we did, it wouldn't matter. We're leaving, and you're not stopping us." The smirk on the man's face faded, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "That's a bold statement, friend. You sure you want to back that up?" Jax didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a slow step forward, his movements deliberate. The other bikers mirrored him, their formation tightening as they prepared for whatever was about to unfold. The air crackled with unspoken tension, and for a moment, everything else faded, the hum of the city, the rustling of the wind, leaving only the standoff on the bridge. Dana's mind raced as she clung to Maggie, her eyes darting between the bikers and the growing number of strangers in the shadows. Who were these people? Why were they here? And why did Jax and his group seem to know exactly how to handle them? "Look," one of the bikers, Eli, spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "We don't want any trouble. We're just trying to get her off this bridge. That's it. Let us go, and we'll be out of your way." The man in the hood chuckled, shaking his head. "You think it's that simple? See this bridge? It's ours. And anyone who crosses it, well," he spread his arms wide, as if presenting a grand stage. "They play by our rules." Dana felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't just a random encounter. These people were organized, deliberate. She glanced at Jax, whose jaw was set, his focus unwavering. The bikers weren't just a group of good Samaritans. They knew exactly what they were walking into. Maggie's voice broke through Dana's spiraling thoughts. "Dana, listen to me," she said, her tone calm but urgent. "Whatever happens, you stay behind us. Do you understand?" Dana nodded shakily. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, every nerve in her body screaming to run, to hide, to do anything but stay here, but she didn't move. Something about Maggie's steady presence kept her rooted. The man in the hood took another step forward, his gang following suit. "Last chance," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Pay up, or you don't leave." Jack squared his shoulders. "We'll take our chances." The man's smirk returned, but this time it was darker, more sinister. "Suit yourself." The moment the words left his mouth, chaos erupted. The gang surged forward, their movements fast and coordinated, but the bikers were ready. They moved as one, forming a protective barrier around Dana and Maggie. Jax was in the thick of it, his fists flying as he held off two attackers at once. Eli darted to the side, his quick reflexes keeping him ahead of his opponents. Dana's heart pounded as she watched the scene unfold, her instincts screaming at her to run, to do something, but her legs refused to move. Maggie stood in front of her, her stance wide and solid, ready to intercept anyone who got too close. "Stay low," Maggie shouted over the noise, her voice cutting through the chaos. Dana obeyed, crouching behind the bikes as best she could. Her breaths came in short gasps, her hands trembling as she clung to the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She could hear the sounds of punches landing, the scuffle of boots against the pavement, the occasional grunt of pain. And then, just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, a piercing whistle cut through the air. It was sharp and commanding, and for a moment, everything stopped. The gang froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the sound. Even the bikers paused, their movements slowing as they turned to look. From the shadows, another figure emerged. This one was different, taller, with an air of authority that made everyone else seem small in comparison. The gang parted as he approached, their previous bravado replaced with wary respect. Well, the new arrival said, his voice smooth and laced with quiet menace. "What do we have here?" Jack straightened, his chest heaving as he wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth. "We're just passing through," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The man raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over the group. When his eyes landed on Dana, they lingered, his expression unreadable. "Doesn't look like just passing through to me." Dana felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to speak up, to say something, but her throat felt like it was closing. The man's gaze was sharp, piercing, as if he could see right through her. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, until the man finally spoke again. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." He turned to the gang, his tone cold. "Stand down." The gang hesitated, clearly reluctant, but they obeyed, stepping back into the shadows. The man turned back to Jax, his expression unreadable. "You've got 5 minutes to get off my bridge. After that..." He let the sentence hang, the unspoken threat clear. Jax didn't waste a second. "Let's move," he barked, his voice cutting through the tension like a whip. The bikers sprang into action, their movements quick and efficient. Maddie helped Dana back onto the bike, her grip firm but gentle. "We're getting out of here," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As the bikes roared to life and the group sped off into the night, Dana couldn't help but glance back. The man stood in the middle of the bridge, his figure silhouetted against the faint glow of the city lights. He didn't move, didn't follow. He just watched, his presence lingering like a shadow long after they were gone. The hum of the motorcycles filled the air as the group sped away from the bridge, leaving behind the ominous presence of the man and his gang. Dana clung tightly to Maggie, her heart still racing, the adrenaline coursing through her veins making her acutely aware of every bump and turn in the road. The cold air whipped against her face, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the standoff on the bridge and the chilling way the man had stared at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that their escape wasn't the end of it. Jax led the way, his figure solid and steady as the bikes roared through the quiet streets. The city seemed eerily empty, the usual bustle replaced by an unsettling stillness. Dana glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see headlights bearing down on them. There was nothing, only the dark expanse of the road stretching behind them. Maggie must have sensed her unease because she tightened her grip on Dana's hand, her voice calm but firm over the roar of the engine. "We're almost there, just hold on." "Almost where?" Dana wanted to ask, but her throat felt tight and the words wouldn't come. She trusted Maggie, trusted Jax and the others, but the unanswered questions weighed heavily on her. Who were those men on the bridge? How had Jax known how to handle them? And why had the mysterious figure let them go so easily? It didn't add up, had the nagging sense of something unfinished refused to leave her alone. The group veered off the main road, heading down a narrow, winding path that seemed to lead into the woods. The trees loomed high on either side, their branches casting long, skeletal shadows that danced in the headlights. The road was rough, the bikes jolting over uneven patches, but the riders didn't slow down. Dana's grip on Maggie tightened as the path grew darker, the forest swallowing what little light the moon provided. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bikes came to a stop in a clearing. The headlights illuminated an old, weathered building that looked like it had once been a cabin or lodge. It was sturdy but worn, its windows glowing faintly from the light inside. Jax dismounted first, scanning their surroundings with a practiced eye before signaling to the others. "This is where we'll regroup," he said, his voice steady but low, as if he didn't want to disturb the stillness of the forest. "Everyone inside, keep it quiet." Dana slid off the bike with Maddie's help, her legs shaky beneath her. She followed the group into the cabin, her eyes adjusting to the dim light inside. The space was sparse but functional, with a few mismatched chairs and a large table dominating the center of the room. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had settled into her bones. Eli shut the door behind them, securing it with a heavy wooden beam. "We need to talk," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made Dana's stomach knot. Jax nodded, his expression grim. "They'll come after us." Dana's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I thought. Her voice trailed off as the weight of his words sank in. "They let us go because they wanted to," Jax said, his gaze meeting hers. "But that doesn't mean they're done. That man—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "He's not someone who gives up easily." Maggie placed a reassuring hand on Dana's shoulder. "We'll keep you safe," she said, her voice steady. "But you need to tell us the truth, Dana. Why were you on that bridge?" Dana blinked, caught off guard by the question. I told you. My car broke down and I was trying to find help." Jack's eyes narrowed, not unkindly but with a sharpness that told her he wasn't convinced. "And you just happened to be on that bridge at that time of night." Dana hesitated, the words catching in her throat. She hadn't thought much about the strangeness of her situation before now, but the way Jax looked at her made her question everything. Why had she been so drawn to that bridge? Why had her car failed so suddenly? "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know why I was there." Ely exchanged a glance with Jax, something unspoken passing between them. Dana could feel the tension in the room growing thicker, the air almost crackling with it. She wanted to demand answers, to understand what was happening, but before she could speak, a loud crash echoed from outside. Everyone froze, their eyes snapping to the door. The sound had come from the woods, the unmistakable crack of a branch breaking underfoot. Jax motioned for everyone to stay silent as he moved toward the window, his movements careful and deliberate. He peered through the curtain, his body tense. "They found us," he said, his voice barely audible. Dana's heart sank as the weight of his words hit her. She had thought they were safe here, hidden away in the forest. But now the danger was right outside, closer than ever. Maggie moved to the side, her grip firm on Dana's arm. "Stay with me," she whispered. "No matter what happens." Dana nodded, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She could hear faint voices outside now, low and menacing, growing louder as they drew nearer. The bikers moved into position, their movements swift and practiced. It was clear they had been in situations like this before, but that did little to calm Dana's racing heart. Jax turned back to the group, his expression hard. "We hold them off as long as we can. No one gets through that door." The room seemed to hold its breath as the sounds outside grew louder closer. The tension was palpable, every second stretching into an eternity. Dana clutched her belly, her mind racing with thoughts of her unborn child. She couldn't let anything happen. Not now, not when they had come so far. And then, with a deafening bang, the door shuddered under a heavy blow. The fight was coming to them, and there was no turning back.